Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to keep talking about verbs today because verbs are just so interesting. The main thing that we're going to focus on today is the way that you can change a verb in order to change not just the content of the sentence, but also the attitude or feeling of a sentence. The way that verbs create not just meaning, but also tone. And the two ways that we're going to talk about that are by talking about voice and by talking about mood. In voice, we're basically talking about in the sentence, if there's an action verb, is that action being done by the subject, in which case it's in the active voice, or being done to the subject, in which case it's in the passive voice. So right now, Mr. Kennedy teaches and the students learn. Those are both active voice verbs. Those are the actions that are taking place. The subjects of those sentences do the action. But let's say we expressed it the opposite way. The students were taught by Mr. Kennedy. The lesson was taught to the students. Now we're in the passive voice. So take a look at this example sentence. In the active voice, Creon ate, there's your verb, an Italian BMT. We all know from reading how hungry for power Creon was. He's also hungry for Subway. So in the active voice, Creon eats the sandwich. The emphasis in the active voice is on the fact that it was Creon doing the eating. But if we took that same sentence and wrote it in the passive voice, now the Italian BMT was eaten by Creon. That's the same verb, and the same thing is happening in the sentence. In both sentences, there's Creon, there's a sandwich, and the sandwich is getting consumed, right? But in the passive voice, now the sandwich is receiving the action. The subject of our sentence is passive, and someone else is acting on it. What happens in the sentence hasn't changed, but the emphasis has changed. When we use the active voice, we really emphasize the actor, the person doing the eating. This is a sentence about Creon. But when we use the passive voice, we emphasize the object, the thing that's receiving the action. This is now a sentence about a sandwich. The other main way that we can change the feeling of a verb is by changing the mood. Now, you're somewhat lucky in English in that we only have a few moods. Some other languages can get more complicated. The main three moods in English are the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The indicative mood is what most verbs are ordinarily in. All of the verbs we've looked at so far are in the indicative, and you spend most of your time using the indicative mood. So in this sentence, Oedipus juggled some chainsaws to get his mind off his problems. We've got Oedipus and he's doing some juggling. We're using the indicative because we're just indicating that that action took place. Notice that it's an active verb that's in the simple past and it's singular because there's one Oedipus. He's got a lot on his mind, so he juggled some chainsaws. But look at this next sentence. In the imperative, Oedipus juggles some chainsaws. Here's that same verb, juggle. Only now the sentence takes the form of a command. This is easy to remember because imperative, that's the same word that gives us words like imperial and emperor. In this sentence, we're giving Oedipus the command to juggle some chainsaws. The other mood in English, the one that you use the least frequently, is the subjunctive. In the subjunctive, we talk about actions that haven't taken place but might, or that could take place, or that we would prefer to take place. If Oedipus were to juggle chainsaws, people would still think of him as an incestuous parricide. So the subjunctive takes this same action, Oedipus juggling the chainsaws, but now we're discussing it not as something that has happened or will happen, but as something that might happen, that could happen. We're talking about a hypothetical situation. So this is wrapping up our discussion of verbs. Are verbs in the active or passive voice? Are they in the indicative, imperative, or subjunctive moods?